Hello, this is David Taylor at Web Media, and I want to share with you today 4 predicted trends that I think will influence online marketing for businesses in 2016. The first of those 4 is demand growth for video. Now, what we're basically seeing is a huge rise in the consumption of video online. People wanting to find solutions to their problems, whatever they might be, and those solutions that they want are in the form of video. So whether it's something to do with DIY, or it's a work problem, or an IT technology problem, people are increasingly going to platforms like YouTube, and they are looking for a video solution. Why? Because we are visually intuitive animals, essentially. We learn quickest by watching rather than reading or hearing, and we understand complex issues a lot more quickly using video. The other reason that I think video is really important next year is because, as you can see on the screen now, video is increasingly being used in websites for a couple of reasons. The increased ability of broadband, fiber-based broadband, to carry video, and also the ability for compression of video, and those two things are making video much more viable, or more viable than ever, to be used on websites. And what we're seeing is video headers being used, and full screen video like you're seeing now, to tell a story, to essentially tell a story about a product or service. And I see that trend really taking a lot more prominence going forward, and that starting to show, particularly through business websites, much more in 2016. The second trend I'm predicting is designing for mobile phone first. Now, the reality of where we've got to on the web is that essentially websites were and have been designed for desktop and laptop first, and mobile device second. So they've been adapted to mobile. But what we're seeing now is that the growth in mobile browsing suggests that actually in the future people will consume online content first from a small mobile device, and perhaps second from a desktop device. And what that means is that we are going to have to consider the way, both as designers and businesses, consider the way that we structure the design of web content for a mobile device, and probably in the format that you're looking at it now, which is the portrait format rather than the landscape format. And why do I say that? I say it because essentially I think people will mostly hold the device in one hand and scroll the page with the other hand. And it's much more difficult to hold a device, or it's not much more difficult, but it is more difficult to hold a device landscape than it is portrait. But that's an aside. The essential point here is that we may see that businesses are going to have to consider much more carefully designing web content and business content for mobile device first. And that is going to change the way in which we create menus, the way in which we set out the information, the length of pages, the key messages, the size of images, and so on and so on. So it's going to be an interesting trend to keep an eye on. The third of my predictions for 2016 is overcoming the noise of information saturation by ensuring crystal clarity. What do I mean by this? Well, I mean that we are now living in a world where we have multiple devices capable of sending information to us 24/7, and that world is essentially saturated with information, and it is becoming more difficult for us to decide which information to invest in and which to discard. And so what I'm saying to businesses right now is, if you want to have your online content step out of the noise, overcome the noise, the general noise of information overload, then you have to ensure that your website or your content is crystal clear in terms of what you do and what you offer, who you are, and what benefits you provide to your customers. Here's an interesting example, and I've picked this example because, not because it's a bad design, although you could argue that. It's more a case of the lack of clarity. And I think what we're going to see increasingly is breaking down of websites, and particularly homepages, into much more simple layouts, simple headlines, bullet points, and simple to consume content. Unlike this one, which has multiple demands on the eyeball for what is this about, where should I look first, what is this website offering me. So I think what we'll be seeing is a greater clarity, and I will be promoting that message to businesses in 2016, which is, think about absolute laser clarity of your message online. There is no room for confusion. And my fourth prediction is the revisiting of e-commerce for your business. Now, what I mean by this is that there are many businesses, and here's a random example of a domestic services company, and many businesses like this who think that e-commerce doesn't have a place in their website. But what I'm suggesting is that e-commerce is now becoming so mainstream that it's probably worth every business revisiting that question of, is there something that I could effectively sell direct through my website? And I've picked this example because whilst you might think that domestic cleaning services would not have an obvious e-commerce solution, the kind of thing that I could see perhaps working on this type of site would be a gift voucher or a trial 2-hour cleaning service that you could buy for yourself or for somebody else, and that would be a no commitment one-off purchase for this type of service. That could be quickly purchased through PayPal or one of those other common mediums through a website like this. So my prediction is for 2016 is very much about I think we will see e-commerce become more prevalent in websites that have not previously had them, and in types of business that had previously considered e-commerce not to be appropriate to them. So there we go. Those are my 4 predictions for online marketing trends in 2016. Demand growth for video, designing for mobile phone first, overcoming the noise of information saturation by ensuring crystal clarity, and revisiting e-commerce for your business.